I've got something really special for you today. We're down here at Silver Dollar City's Roundhouse, and I'm going to take you through their morning prep and what they do to get the trains ready and all the work. This is going to be really cool. We are here at Silver Dollar City's Roundhouse as they're getting the trains ready for the day. They're doing all the morning preparation, and we're going to walk you through it and show you everything they do, show you some of the fun stuff about the engines. We're going to talk about the different engines they've got, and let you see a side of Silver Dollar City that most people don't get to. So this is going to be really awesome. I'm having a blast with this. This is Andrew Dean, who's been working on the train for how long?
I've been here 11 years now.
11 years.
Yep.
Okay, and where were you before this?
I started out at Six Flags in St. Louis, and I was a train engineer up there just as an operator.
And now you're the man on the train.
Yep, I'm the maintenance foreman down here at the Roundhouse, so
Okay.
I'm in charge of the whole show.
This is Noah. And how long have you been on the train here at Silver Dollar City?
12 years.
12 years. What did you do before this?
I was a professional blacksmith for a company called Carnahan White out of Springfield, Missouri. I did that for a couple of years. During the recession, the shop basically shut down, and so I moved down to the Branson area. Actually wanted to be a blacksmith in Silver Dollar City, and there was an opening, so I applied, but they ended up making me operate a cash register, which is not something I'm very good at. And so I wasn't real happy with that, and I was about to quit, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to walk down to the Roundhouse one last time and just see if they'll give me a cab ride at least. And I walked in the door, and the boss was down at the time, and he said, I've been looking for you, we got an opening. And so it kind of just fell into this job, and I honestly thought I'd only do it for a couple of years, but I'm 12 years in, and I'm very invested, and I'll probably retire from here.
They keep multiple trains in the Roundhouse, and the day starts off very early, at least 3 hours before the park opens, because there's a lot to do. Starting with turning the lights on, but then fueling up the engine for the day and making sure everything's ready to go. It's a process, which we're going to get to show you.
This will be my 16th year working with steam locomotives directly, and I've been working around railroads since I was about 13 years old, just in volunteer capabilities and things. So, ever since I was a little kid, I've just loved trains. My parents took me to a tourist railroad over in southeast Missouri called the St. Louis Iron Mountain and Southern Railway, and that's where I got my first taste of steam, and it stuck. So I've been doing it ever since. One of the first things we've got to check in the mornings is make sure that we don't have anything leaking on the boiler. So we look inside of what's called the fire box, which is where literally the fire is. It's a box full of fire that boils the water. It's good and dry. And we flush the bottom end of the boiler out. We always fill it at the end of the night. We fill it really, really full of water. That way all the junk and stuff can settle to the bottom, because you get sediment in it whenever you boil lots of water, just like tea kettle at home. And so we have to flush that out of the bottom in the morning. So we'll open what's called the blowdown valves and let a bunch of that water out. And it takes the sediment with it.
And you do want to make sure you're not in the way when that blows. That's hot water.
So it takes steam, condenses it back into water inside of this brass body here. It's full of oil also, and when that oil floats on top of the water, it's forced through a siphon tube and through this little bitty valve down here, and it will drip upwards and then back out to the air pump. So we drain all the water off first that collected from the day before, close that drain back up, and then we can fill the oil back up. And it makes a mess.
Wouldn't be the Roundhouse if it wasn't.
That's right, and these old trains, everything's a little bit messy.
Okay, so with all these new engines, newer, And everybody's always got their favorite. Which is your favorite now?
My favorite is still 504.
504?
Yeah, I'm happiest with that one, the way it turned out and everything, and it runs good. It's comfortable. Yeah, it's just a good engine.
Well, and it's the one with the tender.
Yep, and yeah, it looks the most like a big passenger engine. So,
yep.
Yeah. This is what's called a sight glass, and this is what shows us the water level inside the boiler at all times. This is probably the most important gauge on the locomotive as far as safety appliance, because you always have to have enough water in the boiler to prevent damage to the engine. So we need to make sure that it usually has about a third of a glass of water at any one time is where we try to keep it. So a little bit lower in the mornings because it doesn't have any steam on it right now, and we'll get it lit up and the water will swell a little bit. But this is what we're constantly watching as we're going down the tracks. So, and we've got our two main steam gauges up here on either side. They're just it's a redundancy to make sure that they are accurate. And then the small gauge in the center is the atomizer gauge. It has to do with the burner inside the firebox. We burn oil here, and oil, as you know, it just kind of runs out. So you have to turn it into a mist to get it to burn, and the atomizer is what does that. And we'll hook it up to air first thing this morning because there's not enough steam on the engine to light it right now. But once we get up to steam pressure, we switch it over to where that is running off of steam, and all it is a jet of steam or air in the morning that blows that diesel fuel, that oil, into a fine mist to create an external fire. We just got done fueling the locomotive. Side tanks are what holds our fuel on the other side of the locomotive. And these are what's actually known as a well tank type of locomotive in regards to its water tank. The water tank is in a well down beneath the frame or between the frame. So that's where we keep our extra water for the boiler, but the fuel is in either. So this is the mechanical lubricator for the locomotive, and again, it takes the steam cylinder oil, but it is feeding mechanically the throttle valve to keep it lubricated, and then both cylinders on either side of the engine. So this is a very important apparatus on the engine. Got to make sure that oil is getting to the cylinder so nothing dries out, so we've got plenty of power, no wear or anything like that. Steam cylinder oil is a very special kind of oil. It's actually made, it's not like your typical motor oil that's made with petroleum oil. It's actually made out of paraffin and tallow. Tallow is beef or pork fat, different types of animal fat. It's very, very sticky, very viscous. And the reason it's made with those different types of fats is it holds up under the steam pressure. It doesn't wash out. Regular oil would just wash away under steam pressure like that. So this is very old technology for the 1820s. This is the front end of the boiler that's known as the smoke box. All those pipes you see in there are the boiler flues or tubes, more accurately, and they carry the hot gases and the exhaust from the firebox in the rear, which you saw me checking earlier, up here to the front and then up the smokestack. This pipe here is called the blast nozzle or exhaust pipe. It comes from the cylinders, and that's where the actual steam exhaust from the locomotive working goes up the stack, and it draws vacuum on our fire. So whenever the engine is working, it creates its own draft on the fire. This pipe that comes in from the side here and turns into a ring is called the blower ring, and it is an artificial draft. So whenever we're sitting still and the engine is not creating its own draft, we turn on a valve in the cab and steam jets shoot out of that ring and up the stack, and that's what creates the draft when we're sitting still. So we're not rolling smoke and creating, problems on park. And all those flues are surrounded by water. That's how we boil the water inside the boiler, is all that heat is transferred through both the firebox at the rear and the boiler flues, and the heat goes into the water and turns into steam. What he's doing there is rushing the flues out. Sometimes they get plugged up because of course we're burning a carbon-based fuel. And oil burners especially, there's no cinders. On a coal oil burning engine, vendors will kind of self-clean the tubes out. On an oil burner, you don't have that. So you've got two options. You either mechanically brush them like we're doing right now. Mechanically, I just mean with a brush. Or, when the engine is running in the morning and working hard, first thing, you can take a scoop of sand and pour it into the firebox, and the draft will pull that sand through the tube and knock all that soot loose, and it'll go up the stack. That's called sanding the flues. But after a while, even that isn't quite enough to keep everything cleaned out, so we end up having to brush it. Whenever you have all that soot build up, it does not transfer nearly as frequently. So,
Brought these engines over, and you guys got to rebuild them. So when they went house, and how much of it was contracted out?
504 we did mostly in-house. We bought 504 and 14 at the same time, for those who don't know, from a man in Minnesota, and we brought them down 2016 was the year we bought them. 504 came directly here, and we started in right away on it. Of course, the boiler was not built here. It was built by an outside company that has what's called an S stamp, which is what you have to have to build a steam pressure vessel these days. The driving wheels, which are the main wheels that propel the locomotive, they were sent off to Pennsylvania to be worked on and made sure that they were in good shape, had new tires put on them, had those reprofiled, new tires put on, and pretty much everything else was done here in-house by STC Craftsman. The brand new cab was built in the welding shop. We did all the plumbing on it, put everything back together, rebuilt the tender, all the paint work was done here. All final assembly and test running and adjustment was done by our shop forces right here. Engine 14, the whole frame and running gear portion of the locomotive, so the whole bottom half was sent to that same place in Pennsylvania, Strasburg Railroad. And they went through that, made sure that it was ready to go for us. So we had a running chassis whenever it got here. And then we had, again, the boiler built, put it together, had the side tanks made, built the new cab here on part, and again, all the plumbing and cosmetics, everything was done here that you see externally. So, and that was a good team effort between the two companies, and that turned out really great. But yeah, a whole lot of the work was done right here on part at STC.
Well, a lot of people, I don't think, realize you guys have a full machine shop here.
Right. So this is our machine shop. It's a pretty basic machine shop, but it handles all of our needs, almost all of our needs down here. Of course, like I said, we can't do the big wheels, the driving wheels off the engines. Those have to be sent out because we don't have a lathe large enough. And the coach wheels too. But as far as making any bearings, bushings, we can work on the pistons, all that sort of stuff. We can rebuild it right here. We've got two lathes. We've got the smaller South Bend lathe over there. That's a 13-inch South Bend lathe, which is great for a lot of the smaller parts. And then we've got the big Monarch lathe over here, which was our original lathe that we had down here. So we make all of the main axle bearings and things for the engines on that because it size-wise. And then we have our milling machine. This is a 9x48, I believe, table milling machine, if I'm remembering right. So modest size for a locomotive shop, but it does pretty well everything we need it to do. But yeah, we can make almost all of our own parts right here. Okay, so we're going to light the engine now. Get all the water out of the lines here. I've got air going to the appliances like we just talked about. So I'm going to light the engine to stop the air. Opening the blower valve right now. It's off, creating the draft up front. I'm making a cloud, am I? Yeah, you're good right now. Okay. And open our atomizer valve I talked about on the burner. Get any water out of that because it builds up in the plumbing overnight. Prime our fuel a little bit. That was the fuel valve I had there. Now, Take a piece of newspaper. Light it on fire. Throw it in. Come on.
Right in the feed water. There's a pipe down the center of this oil tank that we put our feed water in, and it goes right through here and it goes into the drain.
I already got Andrew on this. Everybody's got their favorite engine. So Noah, what's yours?
It changes from year to year. I think this one's still my favorite right now because we just
14.
got done rebuilding it. This one, my background is ornamental blacksmithing.
Mm-hmm.
And so this one, I kind of got to go, we backdated it real far, and I got to do a lot of blacksmithing and ornamental iron on it. And for example, this looks like a wooden cow catcher, but it's all steel.
Mm-hmm.
And me and another guy did the stroke work and the lead light. And the cab is all steel, but we made it look like wood. That's actually, the trim up there is rail cap, or like a handrail.
Uh-huh.
And so really got to kind of pour my heart and soul into this one as far as doing the ornamental iron stuff in my past.
Very neat. And of course, I know you build the smaller engines at home too.
Yeah.
How is your engine at home coming along?
It's getting there, little by little. I did a roll test a couple weeks ago at a buddy's house, and it actually did really well. We actually guessed about a 4% grade, and I was able to sit on the frame and ride it down the hill, and it got pretty scary. So it rolls very freely, so we didn't even have any hot bearings or anything. So, all right, after an inspect, we're going to gear, so that's inspecting all the moving parts, the lower half of the locomotive. I was a train enthusiast my whole life. My guidance counselor actually convinced me that trains wouldn't exist by the time I was an adult, less of all steam trains, so I needed to give up that stupid dream. So I became more focused on metalworking and blacksmithing. I had wanted to be involved with trains, but just never really had an opportunity. I was very green starting out here, but learned a lot by doing. And then I've been volunteering different places. I've been to Roaring Camp. There was a church camp in Oklahoma that had 3 steam locomotives, and I operated all 3 of those. So if you use the hammer, you can tell if a bolt is loose. It'll either spin or it just doesn't ring the same. So that's really the best way to find a loose bolt. Right now he's shut the air off, shut the fire off, and he'll open up the turret, blow all the air out of the lines, and warm them up with steam, and then he will relight the fire on steam, and then once it's running on steam, it just becomes self-sufficient, and it can, so as long as you keep putting fuel and water in it, it can just run forever like that. So our brakes are reduction air, so when there's a loss of air, they come on. And so we have to air them up just to get out of the building, because the brakes will be on super hard by morning because all the air's leaked out of them.
heat from it there.
And then when I'm down here, I also look at the back of the rods, make sure all of our retainers and everything is there.
After all of that work, she's finally ready to back out of the Roundhouse. But she's not ready for passengers yet. There's still a whole lot more to check on the passenger cars and other systems to get it ready to roll for the day. So they back it out of the Roundhouse and then get ready to do more preparation work.
And we can actually show how our brakes work. Because it's a loss of air sets them, so this is our release line, so if I unplug it, you watch that brake shoe. Brakes come on, plug it back in, and they release. Amazing, these little trains, we put around between 50 and 75 miles a day on them. You
Adds
really
up.
see some pretty rough and tumble use, especially on this railroad. It's tremendously curvy. There isn't any straight rail on it, and we've got some very, very steep grades. Steepest steam non-geared. There are plenty of shays and stuff that run on steeper railroads. And as far as a non-geared locomotive railroad, we are the steepest in North America. About a 300-foot section at the bottom of our hill that's 7%, which is very, very steep. We're always using tools and materials in ways in which they were never intended. This is a pump sprayer. This engine, we ran the injector lines here, and it just so happens that you can't get a long spout oil can in here to do the journal boxes. And so came up with this, just modified a pump sprayer where I can shoot pressurized oil anywhere I want. Works pretty good. Right now I'm oiling the axle bearings. They have a sump that holds about half a quart of oil, and there's actually a wick that goes down into the bearing. And so these don't have a pump or anything, they just use gravity to oil the wheels. And we are using a biodegradable soybean-based oil. This particular brand works really, really well. We've had some brands in the past that did not work quite as well. The binder would come out of them, and it would actually clog the oil lines. But this stuff's really good. We're very happy with it. We have had 0 hot bearings since we switched to this oil, and it's got such a good film strength. We only have to oil every 10 hours of operation.
You can see they've got 14 backed up here. They're finishing up the morning inspections, getting everything oiled up and ready to go. They've got the car inspections they've done. Give you a look at the conductor stand as well, but it's been a lot of fun watching them walk through all of this and letting you see all the work and the care. And then what's really neat is these guys, they love their trains. I know I got rail fans that watch. Well, you want a couple of the biggest rail fans. Noah and Andrew are a couple of them. All right, folks, it's the moment you've been waiting for. The backside of water, or at least the backside of Mystic River Falls.
Now we're on.
528, 527, going 5.
And I'm automatically talking to the cars.
4,
Now I'm talking to the engineer.
2, 1.
Much, much simpler than the old.
Oh my goodness, sounds so much better too.
Yeah. Our sound system is incredible, considering that all of the theme parks either have to use a $25,000 forklift battery to operate, or a propane generator that runs continuously. I mean, ours runs off one car battery, and it makes it for like 12 hours.
Wow.
I really don't know. It doesn't make sense that it is able to work, especially these new cars. I mean, they've got, is it 35 speakers?
This is where I spent much of my time here on the train, is the conductor stand. We didn't run with cabooses, but this is where we would sit. You've got a chair, you've got your basic controls right there that they help run your sound system, and there's an emergency brake there. You're not supposed to use it, but just in case something weird happens, like your engineer passes out, never happened, hopefully never will, but they do have an emergency system there. And basically anything you need. Biggest thing the conductor needs though, he's got that sound system to talk to the passengers, do the spiel on the ride, and let you have a fun time, let you know what's going on. Now this is the old setup. They have updated a little bit. They've changed a couple of the sound controls. They replaced the seat. But that's the old one. Let me show you the new one here. Walk you back to the newer car. This car actually came online when I was working at Silver Dollar City. And you see a little bit of a different look and definitely a different stand. This one you've got a ladder as opposed to steps. And then the bench. And you can see not cushioned. And then this actual step ladder they added after I left, which makes it much, much easier to get up there. And then there is a look at the controls for this one. And you can see the sound system, the light panel, and it gives you a good idea of everything there. And of course you've got a couple extra hints just in case you got a conductor that needs it. And then when they're ready to go, they'll put a green sheet in there that lets you know it's cleared and ready.
So our GPS, we use it for speed. Basically, we go slow enough that we have not been able to find a mechanical speedometer. They either max out at 10 or the next size up goes to 60, and so we'd be in the very bottom. So this works. These are almost 20 years old, and it still works. Unorthodox, but it works.
How hot does it get in here in the summer?
I have seen 140. It's a really still day, and it's like 100 degrees outside. Ready on back. Okay. It's clear to shove back. The rewarding part is making a part and putting it on a locomotive and then operating. Like I made the throttles, so blacksmithing that throttle, machining it, installing it, and then getting to pull that throttle every day is pretty rewarding. The job is very varied. It's not the same thing every day. I may be running a backhoe all day long, or welding all day long, or machining all day long, or sometimes I do a lot of carpentry. Every day is different. That's what I like about it. Watch the stack, it's going to blow off the sun.
What they're actually doing here is all that soot that you saw them brush out of the engine earlier, this is how they blow it all out of the engine. Even though they had burned a lot of it off, there was still a lot there. So what they do is they fire the engine up really good and blow all of that out of the smokestack and clear it from the engine. And this is the easy way to do it.
Eyeball 14.
So we've got multiple whistles here, and some of them are Silver Dollar City owned, but some of them are owned by the engineers here personally, and others are owned by some friends of ours that have lent them support. And we like to do it for the variety. And people own these whistles and they want to hear them, but they have no way to blow them. So it's like, yeah, we'll put it on for a week or a month or something and let them hear it. So, like 43 right now, it has my personal whistle on it. It's a Denver Rio Grande Western 5-chime whistle. Means it has 5 tones to it. And it's a replica. It's not an original. Can't afford an original. They're very expensive. But yeah, so that's kind of the deal with the whistles. And we try not to change out too often. If we put one on, it tends to stay there for quite some time.
They also wanted me to make clear that it isn't an open thing to have your whistle dropped off and put on the engine. This is basically people who work for the park or people who have extremely close contact with the park. So please don't contact them and ask to put your whistle on the engine. It doesn't quite work like that. After finishing the run up to the station, they add water to the engine again, and this is something they actually do pretty much every round just to make sure that it's got enough water.
Most of the guys down here are railroad aficionados, or at least have a strong appreciation for the equipment. It gets in your blood after a while. You really start to love the stuff.
Here's that grade that we were talking about earlier. At one point on this grade, the back of the train is actually 10 feet higher than the engine is. It's a pretty steep grade. And here's the sanding the flues. We did that on our way around with the maintenance run as well. And you can kind of see how that works. Definitely a very cool experience. That's the maintenance run of the train. One of the things you don't realize riding in the back is the difference in ride. The back is smooth. The engine, we roll. So if you could share something with somebody who said, I hope to work with trains in the future, what advice would you give?
Read every book you can get your hands on, videos that you can watch. Not just the railfan type videos, get into the mechanical stuff. Learn about welding, learn about machining, learn about physics. There's so much physics that takes place in a steam locomotive. I like to call them the most complicated simple machine on earth because the principles are very simple, but you dive into them, they're quite complicated. But yeah, education is key, and hands-on education.
So there's a look at the Silver Dollar steam train, the preparation, the guys who work on it, some of the fun little facts. I hope you enjoyed this. If you got more questions and stuff, please let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your feedback. Thank you so much to Silver Dollar City and Lisa Rao for making this possible. Thank you to Noah and Andrew for joining me and helping me out, taking me around, showing me everything. Thank you to my patrons, to my financial supporters. Y'all help make this stuff possible. And thank you so much for watching. God bless. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to know about contact information, fan pages, merchandise, and more, please be sure to check the description below. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to know when I have new ones, well, make sure you hit that subscribe button right up there. And if you want to see another one of my videos, well, I've got a great one for you right here. And a huge thank you to these wonderful people here who support me on Patreon and with YouTube memberships. They get behind the scenes information, special perks, and more. If you'd like to know more about that, well, make sure you check that button right there. Thank you so much.